All right, so we have at the moment 4 and soon to be 5 alumni who have agreed to share their time with us today. And so I would like to start by having the 4 of you who are here introduce yourselves, tell us what your job is, and maybe throw in what your major is or a favorite class or something you had when you were here at St. John's and St. Ben's. So I'll just go in the order that I have you on my list. So Freda, would you please go first?
Yeah, sounds good. Hi, everybody. My name is Freda Alvarez. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I graduated from St. Ben's in 2017. My major was peace studies, and then I did a minor in political science. And then I also went on to grad school right after graduating. So I went to St. Cloud State and I got my master's degree in social responsibility. So I feel like it kind of built off my peace studies a little bit. I have been working for the state of Minnesota with the Department of Employment and Economic Development since 2017. I started off as an intern actually with the agency and department I work with today. So shout out to Urban Scholars, the Pipeline program. What I do is I'm a diversity recruiter and equal opportunity officer. So as a diversity recruiter, I do fun stuff like this, interact with the community, build relationships with individuals, with organizations, companies, and stuff like that. And then as an equal opportunity officer, that is where I monitor and enforce the laws, rules, and regulations that pertain to affirmative action, equal opportunity, Americans with Disabilities Act, and other civil rights laws in the programs and services that DEED provides. And so DEED stands for Employment and Economic Development. So for example, the biggest example you can think of right now is unemployment insurance is under my agency. And so we have people providing unemployment law judges, appeals, all that great stuff going on right now during COVID. So that is a little bit what I do. And I'm going to throw in a question for my alumni. What ethics class did you take, right? And then what was our favorite class too? So I remember I took care ethics with Joan. And my favorite class as a peace studies major was Hitler, Bin Laden, and Peace with Professor Kelly Kramer. It was a phenomenal class. And if any of you have not taken peace studies yet, I highly recommend taking at least a peace studies course for an elective or something. It really expands how you think and perceive the world. And people always ask me, what are you going to do with a peace studies degree? This doing exactly what I'm doing right now. And it's been great, to have that degree. So any questions around that, let me know. On to my next colleague.
All right, thank you. Ellen, I believe you're next. Can you tell us about your background a bit?
Hi, I'm Ellen Dean. I graduated in 2014. I was a chemistry major and a swimmer at St. Ben's, and now I'm an advanced analytical chemist at 3M. So basically, I work with the new products, and we take the products and we test them for what's ever in them, making sure that there's no impurities or anything that could kill anybody. And then we teach all the plants how to do the tests that we make and make sure that everybody stays safe. I mostly work with healthcare products, so it's a lot of fancy Band-Aids that you'd get before surgery. My favorite class at St. Ben's was probably, I don't know, advanced analytical chemistry, because that's what I do, but that's so nerdy. I don't want that to be true. And then my ethics class was actually really weird. I ended up having like 3 different profs at the same, like throughout the semester. So yeah, I'm too old to remember what it was called, but so that's my background.
All right, thank you. My dad retired from 3M. He was in the healthcare sector. He worked on Tegaderm and active strips and things like that. So,
Yeah, I test Tegaderm all the time.
cool. Okay, thank you. Let's see, Kelly, how about you?
Hi everyone, Kelly Simbita Bachmeyer, class of 2014. I studied communication, minored in Asian studies. My favorite class, oh goodness, I modified my communications degree to have a focus in healthcare. So I did a lot with Jen Kramer in a lot of very specific independent studies working with both the community and lots of shadowing healthcare professionals and people in business. So that leads, I guess, to my ethics class I took, ethics in healthcare. I can't remember who taught it, but it was in the 4th floor of the main. I think it was actually a nursing class. But all of that is background. My job, I work in healthcare, no surprise. I work at a company called Ability Network. I'm a product manager. And so my role is around Medicare billing. So my company does several different products, but specifically I am over all of our all payer billing products. And was previously over our Medicare products. So I always say, as someone who's, I think, out of college 6 years, I probably know more about Medicare than the average person, and it's not always a good thing. But specifically in my role for all payer, we look at every single payer. How do you bill? How do you get claims out the door? So a lot of information around claims processing, future analytics. And as a product manager specifically in that business space, they say it's more around all of my product decisions for growth and development. So very different than most people's jobs, I feel like. But it's really fun. I really enjoy it.
Thank you. All right, John, you're up.
Hey everybody, my name is John Nguyen. I double majored in economics and Hispanic studies, and I graduated in 2019, so I'm still a youngin. I work as the morning edition host as well as the daily news assignment editor for South Dakota Public Broadcasting. We are an NPR member station with the coverage of the entire state, and also we are a PBS affiliate. What I do is that I essentially host all the local breaks. So I actually just, before I came on to the call, I just finished my my newscast at 9 a.m. So very nice to see each and every one of you. And I also assign a lot of stuff. I oversee a few interns. I assign news stories that we think might be interesting coverage, and work with a whole crew of reporters around the state to get what we need to be published on the website and also on the radio. I would say my favorite course at St. John St. Ben's was probably chamber choir. I've been there for 4 years. And my ethics course I took in senior year, it was with Professor Houston. And it was good, evil, and limitations of human nature. I have to be honest here, I wasn't the greatest student in that class, but I think the things I've learned in there stuck with me way past graduation. I still have those books on my shelf that I like to read from time to time. So
very nice. Philosophy for the win. Very nice. Thank you. And so when Shandon comes in, we'll have her introduce herself, and then she can join in wherever part of the conversation we're at that point. All right, so I sent to the panelists 4 questions ahead of time to have them speak a bit about, and then after that, I would like, those of you who are students, if you have questions, write them down along the way so that you can you can ask and keep the conversation going a little bit after we've been through the sort of pre-programmed part of this. Okay, so I think we'll just keep going with the order we've been in. So the first question is, in general, where does ethics show up in your day-to-day work, and what sort of ethical issues do you regularly encounter? So Freda, could you start us off?
Sure. So like I said, I work with the law, and that is always something to deal with every day, because we know, or at least I believe, that the law is written to uphold the status quo, right? And to serve the dominant class. And so sometimes, or at least how I like to view my interpretation of the laws, to be proactive, to be equitable, to always have this equity lens on diversity and inclusion and justice, right? That's another part that comes into this, because without justice, diversity and inclusion is just a facade. So I use the law to be proactive in things like people don't really, for example, understand affirmative action. People always think of it as a quota, and it's not really a quota. It's to reflect the workforce that is represented in the state that you work in. So it's to make sure that as government employees, we look like the people that we serve, whether or not it's in the Twin Cities or in the rural area, that we reflect the diversity that Minnesota has. And so, on days like this, or not days like this, but those are questions that come up, and that you have to really take the time to dissect and understand in order to understand, right, the ethical problem, right? Because we want to give people an equitable chance in the society that we know has had these like systemic barriers, right? And so especially working with government, I think or working within government, it's so important to be aware of these biases and prejudices that impact everyday things, like everyday people. Like I said, my agency, Employment and Economic Development, we work with unemployment insurance. And right now, who is COVID impacting the most? Black and brown communities, right? Poor communities, blue collar communities, right? I have the privilege of being able to work from home, as a little bit higher on the class scale. So you have to take into consideration the impacts. And so another agency that's in DEED is Disability Determination Services. So people submit their information to make a claim to get disability insurance. They work under DEED, but then they're also managed by the federal government, state Social Security Administration. And then we have State Services for the Blind, which services blind Minnesotans. And how do we bring equity in those experiences and choices to give people with disabilities the same right life that we all live? And there's so many things to consider. It's like every day there's an ethical choice. And even with recruiting, I think there's kind of ethics. I've never really thought about it, and I'm an external processor, so sorry if I go in tangents and I don't make sense, but like even with recruiting, I can see the ethics of it, right? Like I am titled a diversity recruiter, so that means I want to always be on the lookout for diverse talent, not just, the basic like physical things like race and gender, but also like way of thought, where people grew up, rural, city, did people grow up in like, in disability culture or not, where, are they first language, what's their first language, how high of education do they have, are they a union member or not? Like there's so many things to consider, I think, in recruiting as well, in order to make decisions of like what kind of diversity you're going to bring into, and how you will handle folks that aren't really about diversity, because they can voice their opinions too, but it's like the ethical point for me with being with government is like, where do you draw that line where it's like bigoted and your own opinions? And so that's also something to also consider and deal with. And I'm going to stop now before I keep rambling. On to the next.
All right, thank you. Ellen, where do you see ethics showing up in your day-to-day work?
So, excuse me. Every day we do like 10 tests on all these products, making sure they're safe. And then there's like 10 things to test within each test that have to pass. And so it's a lot of work if something fails. So a lot of the time our ethics comes in being like, well, this failed. Do we want to retest it, or can we make it work? But that's pretty crappy. So a lot of the time we have to end up being ethical and retesting the whole thing to make sure that customers are safe. So it's mostly that, and cherry picking different data depending on if you want it to look good. It's unethical to pick certain data that'll make you look better, even if it's not truly your values. And we report everything to the FDA and the European FDA basically. And so when they're going over it, we want to look good, but you have to be ethical and tell them everything that's going on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. All right, good. Let's see. And Kelly, how about you?
So I A little bit different, I think, than what Ellen and Freda have said. Our focus on ethics in my area is more around HIPAA and HIPAA compliance. As I'm sure no one is surprised to hear, claims have a lot of PHI. We, as an entire company, are really focused around ensuring that both our provider information and then the provider's patient information is secure. That would probably be the biggest focus of my time, is make sure we're not, saving stuff, leaving anything around. But yeah, that's healthcare is a lot of PHI based ethics.
And PHI is personal health information.
Protected health information, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So Chen is just logging in here. So welcome, Chen. Nice to see you.
Hi, everyone.
We welcome. Thanks for being here, running from one meeting to the next. We are still in our first round in our question here. So I think what I'll do is have John say his piece, and then I'll have you introduce yourself and then tell us about ethics in your job. All right. So John, if you could tell us about where ethics shows up in Morning Edition, or the news in general, let us know.
Yeah, so when it comes to journalists in general, the purpose is to tell the truth, right? Is to inform people who read in, who listen in, whatever, on what's going on in their local communities. And that could span from, like a city event to a global thing. And I would say that ethics kind of shows up a lot in the day-to-day life, because, there's a lot of things that we take into account. We have to process all this information that we get from interviewing a variety of people from different backgrounds and synthesizing that into an article or a news story that people eventually consume. And so obviously our goal is to get to the truth. Our goal is to explain all of these, all the perspectives of everybody in this one thing. So there's a lot of things that could go wrong when it comes to talking about news. Obviously, people can relate to what, people are saying with fake news. They associate this monolithic the media, which doesn't exist. You know what I mean? Like it's all, there's newspapers, there's radio stations, there's TV channels that people can use to gather different information. And obviously, when you're writing that story, all that information is channeled through you. So obviously, there's an element of bias. Our goal is to take our bias and like pick it up and then move it to the side so that we're able to construct this one thing that people can use to make their own informed decisions. And it's our goal is to try to understand that person's perspective, even though like personally you might think that person is crazy, with the way that they're talking about or something similar to that. But when it comes to making that ethical choice, that's why we have edits. That's why we have people who look through our work and ask those questions to ourselves to make sure that we have all our stuff together, and ensure that the quality is there, and the point of that person that you interviewed is coming across to the people who are going to read or listen to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I imagine sometimes interviews can be an interesting navigation at times.
Oh boy. Right. Oh boy.
Thank you. All right, Chen. So I'll have you do two steps at once here. If you could introduce yourself, tell us what your job is, but then also what your major was, and if you had an ethics class here. Well, I know you did, but what ethics class you took, and if you had any favorites classes over the time that you were here.
Oh.
I threw that one in at the last minute. If you can't think of anything, that's okay.
Thanks for the persistence, Reed. Hi, everyone. My name is Chen Nguyen, and I graduated in 2018. I majored in philosophy, actually, and environmental science. So now I am based in DC. I work at a nonprofit research organization called the World Resources Institute. So our organization, does all kinds of things on like climate, energy, water, land, so all kinds of environmental issues. And the approach is to use data or informed research to like influence society policies, and so pretty broad. But in terms of what I work on is kind of a really niche piece for climate action and corporate. So helping companies reduce their emissions in line with climate science. So I work on an initiative that is a partnership between my organization, so WRI, and WWF and CDP and UN Global Compact. So it's a partnership of 4 environmental NGOs or organizations coming together, kind of championing companies to step up their climate ambition. So what we do is to come up with methods and tools and resources to help companies set these targets themselves. So I understand it's kind of abstract, but basically what we do is to tell a company, so this is how much you emit, how much greenhouse gas you emitted this year, and from this number you have to reduce to this number in 2030, and this way you can ensure that if all the companies do the same, we can ensure that we can keep the temperature increase of the world to like 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees, 3 degrees, that these concepts that you might have heard of from the Paris Agreement. So I took a lot of ethics class at CSVSGU because I was a philosophy major. I took feminist ethics. I think I took moral philosophy, or maybe I didn't. I'm actually like skipping on it a little bit. I took ancient philosophy. I think I took ancient philosophy. In terms of what was my favorite, maybe I think feminist ethics was probably one of my favorite. And I can comment on that a bit more when we go to the question about how like justice show up in my personal lives and work.
Sure. Great, thank you. And so then, so can you tell us about, maybe you sort of already have, but where ethics shows up in your day-to-day work, and what sort of ethical issues are you regularly encountering?
Yeah, so I think so first of all, we work with companies, and that means we have to make sure we protect their data and we keep all of their information confidential. So that's just kind of a basic agreement every time when a company approaches us, or when we're looking at their confidential data, it's something that we always keep kind of internally. And just another part of my job is I serve as a validator. So we came up with all these standards for companies on how they can set their targets, and so we also verify their targets against all of our standards. So part of my job is to looking at all of the submissions from companies and to see if they have met our criteria. So obviously there's confidential information within that. Another aspect of how ethics show up in my work is we are a partnership of different organizations, and so we have to make sure that when we say we approve a company's targets, it's agreed upon by all parties. So that means when a company submission comes to us, first there's what we call lead reviewer that's assigned to the submission, who does a kind of comprehensive assessment of the target, and like goes in a query round with the company for additional information. But then another reviewer from another partner organization will look at the same submission to say if I disagree with your recommendation. And then this target is again brought up onto a weekly meeting with all the partners to discuss whether everybody agrees to the decision. So we make sure that this is made, the decision is being made fairly, And, you know, if an organization has any kind of financial relationship with the company, or that has assisted with the company in their target development process, that organization cannot be the reviewer. So that is just to make sure that we're doing everything objectively. And I think over time, because we're trying to set a standard for all companies, we always have to stick to the same rules. And that may seem boring at times, like we have to make sure that it's even 0.0 difference is not tolerated, because if you allow a company to be different, then other companies will ask for the same. So we always have to stick to the same rules. And over time, we're becoming more and more transparent about how we are looking at these targets. So we come up with this protocols that is very transparent in how a reviewer looks at a target. And over time, this can be kind of outsourced to third parties so they can serve as reviewers in the future. That's our mission. Yeah.
All right, thank you. So, I mean, looking at this, right, we've got, here are some of the key words that I'm hearing, right? Equity, and, you know, honesty with data, privacy, truth, bias, right? Transparency, confidentiality, right? All of these terms that have come up just in, you know, these few minutes of talking about this, that tie to lots of the things that we've been talking about in class. All right, my second question for the panelists was, where does the idea of justice show up in your work or personal lives? And the reason why I asked this as a separate question, because ethics is a much bigger, you know, if we're looking at a Venn diagram, right, we've got ethics is a big bubble and justice is inside of it, right? It's also big, but it's not the same thing. And so if you don't, you know, you may not think that you have a very different answer when it comes to justice than sort of the ethics more generally. But if you do have some comments about where justice shows up, that's been a bit of a theme in our course. And so I was hoping to get some comments on that. So we can start back at the beginning. Freda, where does the idea of justice show up in your work or personal life?
Yeah, it's definitely hard a little bit at work, because I think my work self is a little more reserved than my personal self, which is a little more radical. And and so, you know, as I'm speaking, this is like personal, don't associate my opinions with my job, this is just me. So what I tell folks in like this justice, because I think to believe you can change the system from within is a little naive, because the system was made in this way to perpetuate the status quo, as I've mentioned a couple times, right? So I think we need thinkers that like are in, right? But then I also think we need these radical folks that challenge us, right? Like maybe we don't agree with their tactics, but at the end of the day, what the point they're trying to get across is, right, like we want justice. So I think of like folks on the inside, right? Like myself, government workers, maybe even nonprofits, and then folks maybe who have been protesting, and we think back to this summer, right? And think about like pressure and how pressure makes a diamond, right? Like you take like this nasty stuff that we're going through, and like with both sides kind of like putting this pressure on each other, like this diamond will come out. And it's going to take a while though, right? Like this doesn't just happen over time or overnight, excuse me. It happens over time, and it happens when both folks, I think, are coming at each other, if you will. And like I said, I was a peace studies major. So what has been happening, you know, it's people, if you haven't taken peace studies classes, it's not just being hippy dippy. It's like we're studying violence and how conflicts arise and how people have been able to quell those conflicts and stuff like that. Like I mentioned, Hitler, Bin Laden, and peace. Like that was a crazy course. Like, so justice is a little bit hard for me, because like I said, I'm proactive with like the laws, rules, and regulations that I have, but then I'm also tied by them as well. And so I can be only as proactive a little bit, because if we think then class analysis. I'm like, I have a little bit more to lose. Like I've developed a kind of lifestyle around the class that I'm in now. Like I have a house, I have a dog, she's the cutest. So I don't have a 2-legged child, I got a 4-legged child, which I think is a little bit more expensive. She just got her tooth extracted yesterday. And I'm like, I have to pay how much out of pocket? Don't grow up, y'all. Stay young, please. Anyways, so justice. In, like I said in my work, it's a little bit hard sometimes, but then when I think about justice, like for me, because I'm a government worker, sometimes I can't and wasn't able to like be out on like protests. But again, because of my class, I'm able to redistribute my wealth. So that's one of the ways that I make sure I practice justice, is by redistributing wealth. Because even though I'm a woman of color, a woman with a disability, like a woman, like all these other, you know, factors of marginalized identity, I also am a college graduate. I'm a light-skinned Native Latina. Like I've, you know, moved up in the class scale. And so I have the privilege of being able to analyze my actions. And one way that I do that, like I said, is by redistributing my wealth. And for sure, there's other things I can do, which is why I'm friends with people that challenge me to get out of my comfort zone than, you know, just donating money and stuff like that. But justice is, I think, a commitment, and it's a lifelong commitment.
Thank you. Excellent. So Ellen, how about you? Where do you encounter justice?
So when I think of justice, I think of like equality for everyone, specifically racial equality and everything that's been going on lately. So at my work, it's a lot of old white men, like a lot. And so I really like it when I see more diversity around, and 3M has been really trying to get more diverse. And for example, like the last division I was in, there was a total of 4 people of color, and they were all laid off at the same time. So the entire division became old white men and a couple women. And I left that job, and my current job is much more diverse, which I like. And then also we have a different lecture series every month, and they've been trying to get more diverse speakers, because talking to an old white man about chemistry gets really boring. And when you get new perspectives in, it really helps everything. So like last month they had a transgender woman of color, and it was like inspiring, and she's working on gun violence and trying to eliminate that in I think St. Louis. But anyway, so it's just kind of developing, and it's like what Freda said, where it's a lifelong thing and they're trying to grow and make it more equal for everybody.
Okay, thank you. Kelly, what is your experience with justice?
So I would say that where I sit in my day job, I have many less examples than everyone else here on the business side, and I'm not working directly with can people pay their bills, can people do a lot of the things that you think about with healthcare. I would say specifically on my in my day-to-day, I have been we've a pretty diverse company. We have people all over the United States, so we have a lot of differing perspectives. So it is consistently humbling to talk to others throughout the world, both in location, backgrounds, ethnicity, to really shape how we are making business decisions. Obviously, it always can be better. So that's something that I continue and do my best to keep at the forefront of my day-to-day. Specifically in my personal life, I would say that throughout the last, year-ish, I think we've all had some election fatigue, maybe is a nice way of saying that. But I have spent a lot of time with my friends, family, discussing my confusion around how people have different views than me, and my views are way more inclusive than others, is what I've learned. And I think that what Freda's spoken to and what Ellen and everyone has chatted about really reflects kind of my views. And it's been a kind of uphill battle, I feel like, this year to maintain positivity and excitement around growth and growth of our country. And I feel like specifically for me, as someone who has a lot of privilege, I do my best at least once, or try my best at least once a day, to take a step back and see and read and learn and listen to what others are experiencing. Because I just, this might be an overshare, but I just haven't had that experience. And so it is an active effort that I'm trying to put myself in to make sure that I am taking the moment, learning alongside of people, and then can root that into my own growth in the future. And it's not as hard as people living it, but it is something that I think is really important.
Mhm. All right, thank you. John, how about justice for you?
Yeah, when I think of justice in a public radio journalism context, I think of fairness and impartiality. Um, when I give an interview, I'm not trying to, catch that other person in the act of them crossing over their words or be like, aha, I got you, That's not really fair to that person who I'm interviewing. It's more understanding their perspectives of why they think that way, why they decide to act that way. And, like a good example would probably be elected officials. Obviously, they run on a particular platform. Maybe you yourself might have a different perspective on how they do it. You might agree or disagree with them. But like I mentioned before, you take all your stuff, all your personal background stuff aside, and you take that in. When it comes to impartiality, a hyperlocal example was when I used to write for The Record. I was also part of, St. John's Senate at the time. And I'd imagine I can't, as a club auditor, be in charge of The Record's funding if I also write for The Record. So obviously that's a conflict of interest there. And that's why most media organizations, you can see that sort of balance. That's why you have so many other people in that organization to keep us in check. So we can check others, so it's this whole system that evolves together that ultimately promotes what we hope for is justice. Obviously the word justice is a little different in other contexts, but when I think of that in a journalistic point of view, I think of fairness and impartiality.
Thank you. All right, Chendan, how about you? Where do you see justice showing up?
I think I advocate for just justice or just fairness in terms of expectation of your work performance between female male. Again, it's the topic of old white male in workplace, and like junior and senior employees. And this is sort of a personal and also work related example, because I was in a team, a 2-person team with another pretty senior and really well respected colleague, and he was, always seen as this very intelligent person, is really knowledgeable. But just over maybe the period of 2 years I've worked with him, I observed like that he actually does not do the real work and likes to take credit, and so a lot of behaviors that I found really intolerable. So it was just tricky for me to voice that concern in the beginning, as I was only junior person who was working with him very closely and could observe that. But then we had more actually 2 other like female junior colleagues who actually shared the same concerns with me. And I think with that kind of when you can collect that little group of your allies, it's easier to kind of bring that concern that as a pattern of behavior of this individual to like senior managers. And so we successfully had this session with the HR to be very open and direct about our comments for him. So that was just a very like recent event actually. And like for me, it's kind of about starting from where I am. Where I work every day is to advocate for the fairness in terms of what you expect from a female junior person who you always can trust to deliver and do good work. Whereas for another senior male colleague, it seemed like the standard is lower and he could get by with not doing much. And that is, for me, first of all, unfair and just not productive, because we work at this organization with a lot of talented people, and we have this bigger and very urgent mission of trying to resolve the climate crisis. And at the same time, you see that some people are kind of have this egoistic approach to their work and the kind of the credit that the work can bring him, and that is not practical or not productive for me. So I think, just like speaking of election, right? Like actually seeing Kamala Harris debating Mike Pence, and then just being able to say, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking, and like, don't interrupt me, basically. I think that's really powerful, and it's really helpful to see more female leaders in powerful positions, because then you can be inspired and be like, yeah, this is the right behavior that we should all enforce, because if females are challenging males to be more competitive and productive and collaborative, it's, at the end of the day, it's good for everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Oh, wow. You guys are saying so many great things. Thank you for this. Since I want to make sure we have a little bit of time for questions, and noticing that it's almost 10 o'clock already, I'm going to skip to the last question, which is about what parts of your education here at CSBSJU do you think sort of best prepared you for dealing with the things that you have to deal with in terms of ethics and justice? So we'll go through the five of you again, and then I'll open it up for the students to ask some questions. So Freda, you're up.
I really think the Benedictine values had a good influence. I fought for the Benedictine values on campus. You know, I talked about being a little bit more radical outside of work. I was an active student advocate on campus. I worked with the Intercultural International Student Services Department. And so I was always trying to, you know, make campus more aware and inclusive of diversity and more equitable. And so, so there was that part in really kind of building the foundation. And like I said, the Peace Studies department also helped. Like when I first wanted to come to St. Ben's, I thought I wanted to help people by being a nurse. And then I visited on Science Day and I was like, chemistry, math, biology? I don't think so. So I was like, how else can I help people, you know? And I got introduced to Peace Studies, and every year I took Peace Studies classes. So I knew I wanted to major in Peace Studies as soon as I got to St. Ben's. And then, like I said, I wasn't done learning just yet. And to be honest, I was scared of full-time adulting. So I wanted to continue into grad school. And so I think St. Ben's really built that foundation in me too, to like continue my education, because before St. Ben's, like I did this Upward Bound program, a TRIO program for like first gen students. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to college. And then, you know, having the support that I did at St. Ben's and the community that I built really showed me. I was like, I think I want to keep learning. And then I had a rude awakening when I went to public school for grad school. I was like, what? They're not treating me as delicately as St. Ben's did? Like, man, I missed how St. Ben's held my hand a little bit through everything. I had some stuff that I had to deal with in grad school, as you know, being a first gen student, but we figured it out, graduated on time, thesis submitted, like we're good. But yeah, I mean, and I also feel like I integrated myself into the Benedictine values too. Like at St. Ben's, we have the Benedictine Friends program. So if any of you haven't taken advantage of it or are kind of nervous, I thought it was a really great program and it was super fun. I mean, it's not just only or always talking about religion. Like they're really great mentors to have and learn more about, you know, what our college is founded on. And so yeah, I give my props to St. Ben's. I definitely would have changed some things, but I do it all over again as well.
Thank you. All right, Ellen, how about you?
So at St. Ben's, you take an ethical class focused for chemistry majors, basically. And I think that really prepared me for my job because it basically showed you exactly what could happen if you were to cherry pick data or not do your job properly. Lots of lawsuits and stuff like that. And then, yeah, I also took a Benedictine values-based theology class. So I would agree with Frida and say that that really impacted me and made me want to be more ethical and open and build a community at work. So yeah, basically those two.
Okay, thank you. Kelly.
I would say that one of the things that is sticking out to me, especially during this conversation, is how St. Ben's in several aspects has always provided myself, and I hope others feel this way, opportunities for conversations that push your boundaries of learning and understanding. Even today, listening to my co-panelists talk, I'm reflecting on a lot of things in my day today that I think is just, it makes my heart happy to know that that aspect of the community has not changed. And I think in general in my day to day, kind of as I think everyone's alluded to, you're able to build on skills that you can utilize, but also more than anything else, it sharpens critical thinking. And I think especially this year, where I sit in my role and in my team, that is not a skill everyone has. And so to consistently bring that in, thinking about both ethics and justice, but also what that person has been going through is really critical to your success as you look forward into um, the rest of your career and your time at St. Ben's. And then, as I mentioned, uh, even thinking about this conversation today, I definitely am going to be reflecting on, oh my goodness, all of these great things that everyone has said. Because it is really important for not only your learning there, but lifelong learning. And I think I would say that's the key thing that I would take away.
All right, thank you. John.
In addition to what everybody else has been saying, I would probably say participation in clubs and organizations as well, because I think going to college was, since I was a first gen student, I am a first gen student, it was very interesting to see so many people with diverse ideas and perspectives on things, and I wouldn't be able to do that or gain that knowledge if it weren't for the fact that, you know, I was participating with the same activities as everybody else. I was working with administration at St. John's and seeing that those ideas of like administration, of students, and everything in between kind of help reinforce that idea of, you know, what's that perspective of everybody involved? How can I bring this compromise to promote change at a hyper local level? So I'd say those participations and exposure to other people who have those same shared values, those Benedictine values, but also bring those values out in a different way than what I might expect.
Thank you. All right, Chen, how about you?
I would say that I think the feminist as a philosophy class that I took was pretty helpful in just helping me understand, you know, just gender kind of inequality at a bigger scale, so I can, and also I just remember like at the end of my probably my philosophy capstone class, we were asked to write down all of the virtues that we want to maintain throughout our life beyond college. And I think so these are really important for me, and kind of combining these two together, it's kind of for me, I want to uphold these virtues myself, and also I expect that from others, or at least people around me I choose to be friends or who are my colleagues. So when I see something that's not right, I think I find that it's easier for me to kind of separate myself as sort of this Asian female identity, you know, kind of feeling like, oh, I should not speak up, or yeah, I should probably just keep it to myself. But I feel like I can actually separate, kind of take a step back and be like, you know, I should speak for what is right and what makes everything better. So I think that was helpful.
Thank you. Okay, lots of great things. I hope that the 21 of you students have, or at least some subset of you have come up with some interesting questions. What else would you like to hear from our panelists today? We have about 8 minutes left. And if anybody wants to post it in the chat just to me and I can voice the question for you, that's fine. Everything takes longer on Zoom. Yes, Olivia, is that you?
Yeah, I was wondering, where do you think that we're succeeding in like your personal careers as well as in like our society, and where do you think we're failing? Where do you think we could grow? And
So are we failing or succeeding in terms of making things more ethical? Is that the idea?
the question is, how are we succeeding and how are we failing? What are we doing well? What are we struggling with?
Okay. Anybody want to take that? How are we succeeding? How are we failing? What can we do better?
I can start with a comment, not that
Sure.
I am an expert in any way, but I would say that I think to be honest, I'm not really sure we're succeeding right now. If you're asking me, sorry, overshare. But I would say I think one of the reasons we aren't is because of a very great divide that is in our current system. We have a very us versus them, or me versus you culture right now, and it's consistently puts people, I think, both on edge and in the defensive, and it doesn't allow for a global view. Obviously, there's a lot to unpack in that one sentence. That's not a very like, this is an answer, this is how you can do that. But I think looking back on this year, post-COVID, during COVID, all of it, I think that's where I would say in my day to day, in my personal life, looking at society and what I reading and seeing, outside my house. I have been home since March. It was a very interesting start to my marriage with my husband. We got married in February and we have not left each other's side in 11 months. But we talk about this all the time. It's very much, well, you are doing this and I'm doing this, but we have a very big divide in wanting to be right, not wanting to be what's best for everyone. And I think that when you talk about ethics or you talk about justice, if you can't even get past the what's best for the whole, then you already have a larger roadblock. And that's what, in my opinion, I consistently am seeing, and why I don't know if we're doing, to the question of what are we doing well or what are we doing poor. In my current 10 a.m. brain, I only have what are we doing poor.
You've actually tapped into some themes we've been talking about here. So you didn't know it, but see people, I'm right. There's a theme here. Okay, what else? Do other panelists have any comments about that particular question? What we're doing well or badly, or why?
Maybe I can add a little bit to, I can add a little bit to what Kelly's been saying. It seems to me that most of the time people gain knowledge or have this sort of image in their mind of somebody else, right? Of that them perspective. But honestly, once you start talking to somebody else and you develop that rapport, even if it's just for a few minutes, things start to change a little bit differently. You're just like, oh, this person wasn't as bad as I think they would, that I initially thought. And that could be, a huge thing. Obviously, South Dakota has been in the news all the time for COVID, and I don't think that's going to change for a while. But just having interviews with people and just understanding what they have come from kind of gives you that perspective of bridging that perspective. And so I would say probably that we aren't doing too well in terms of making things more just, making things more ethical. But we've started to identify some of the issues there and working, if not slowly, on those solutions.
Mhm. Anyone want to add or expand or?
I would totally add more, but I would definitely go over like 3 minutes because, like I said, I'm an external processor, and I'd be like, and then this, but then this, but then this, and then this. Like y'all have already seen me talk. Like I have a million things at once, and so long answer short is half of me wants to be optimistic and is a little, and it's like, yeah, things aren't as bad. And then the other half of me is like, what Kelly kind of started off with is like, no, it's just transformed and changed itself in order to fit in today's society. Have we really broken the status quo? No, it's become more insidious. Like all of the systems and barriers have not been broken. Yes, we've had the civil rights law and ADA and all these other laws, but like I said before, these laws are written to service those in power. Like they're still not making an equitable society. They're still not, they're making it equal. And there's a difference between equal and equitable, right? And then there's a difference between equity and justice. Like, so yeah, see, I already start going. So I'll leave it there.
Yep.
I will say that y'all can LinkedIn connect with me if y'all are active, and we can totally keep this conversation going. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is the other thing that Laura Hammond and XPD told me to tell you all, which is that most of our panelists are part of a program called Interaction. And I put an announcement on Canvas about this, where you can contact alums, any of the people whose faces you see, but also lots of others, and do informational interviews with them and, learn about different fields and things like that. So I did post information about that on Canvas, and I'd be happy to answer more questions about that. In the meantime, I think we need to give some virtual applause or real applause if you want to clap on camera. That's cool too. Thank these 5 people for taking an hour out of their days to help us understand real life ethics. And so I really appreciate the 5 of you spending time with us today. And I hope that you all stay well and continue to, make progress, right? Our baby steps maybe in ethics. So